Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to Voice in the Desert viewers from around the world. Welcome to another public chat, this week on the general subject of Bible prophecy. Now, today I'm going to be sharing for a few minutes about the subject of wisdom before we get stuck straight into it. This will be wisdom and how it relates to Bible prophecy and the return of Jesus. When I've finished with these introductory comments, I'll be reading out various comments and questions that you, the audience, have emailed to me during my address. I can't guarantee to know the answers to them all, especially because the subject of Bible prophecy can be pretty complex. But I will do what I can to share some of my personal insights with you on the subject. As usual, those questions which are most relevant to the topics being discussed will be the ones given priority if we have too many questions to answer them all. The address for your emails appears on the screen, so you can start using that anytime you like. I should explain that I have been reticent to get into Bible prophecy for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is that there's a lot of disagreement amongst Christians over how to interpret it. I don't want to unnecessarily create controversy. I think there's a lot of room for disagreement on the details. So I don't wish to alienate any of you just because of a difference of opinion on a minor detail of Bible prophecy. Another reason why I've been reticent to get into this great subject is that I do not consider myself to be an expert on it. Okay, I have written a few books, including 3 novels that relate to Bible prophecy, but even with those books, I'm not able to recite references and rattle off information from the top of my head. Took a lot of cross-checking as I went along to be sure that I wasn't contradicting myself or in some other way talking myself into a corner. As I get older and as my memory fades more each day, which it is, it gets harder and harder to keep these things straight in my head. So please do be prepared today that some of my answers are going to be I don't know or I don't remember. However, my decision to proceed with this discussion relates to my understanding that what the last book of the Bible really is this. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ. Those are the first 5 verses in the first verse of the first chapter. And that's my primary interest in the revelation. So many people miss it, and that's what sets them up for failure in all of their attempts to unravel the mysteries in the book. That first verse in the revelation of Jesus Christ goes on to say that it's for the servants of Jesus Christ. And therein is the other reason why people so often end up running themselves around in circles when they attempt to understand the book. If you're not prepared to serve Jesus, and if you're not looking to understand him more clearly, then there really is no point at all in even opening the revelation. It's just not for you. It's not what it's about. But if you are prepared to serve Christ, and if you want to see him more clearly, then even a bumbling old man like myself can probably say things that will help to clarify what the book is all about. And a lot of that clarity just comes from kind of untangling the preconceptions that people get from other sources. Okay, so I'm going to get into my introductory comments now, and please share your comments and questions even as I speak. A number of children's stories tell about someone getting one or more wishes, and then they waste the wishes on things that don't really bring happiness. As a boy, I had heard the story of Solomon being given such a wish by God. It wasn't all that different from the fairy tales, except that this one had a ring of truth about it. What a privilege it would have been to be given a wish by God. And how clever of Solomon to have asked for wisdom. He could have asked for wealth or for power or for health, but by asking for wisdom, he gained the others as well. Wisdom, by the way, is the ability to make the right choice between several apparently equal alternatives. Indeed, it must have taken a bit of wisdom for Solomon just to have known to ask for wisdom. As I heard the story, the obvious conclusion for me was that I should be asking for wisdom too. I don't know my age when I first prayed for wisdom, but it would have been well before my teens. And I kept praying for it. I continue to pray for it almost every day today. Over the years, I've come to see how important those early prayers were. I later learned that Jesus had promised his followers that if they could receive things from God if they asked for them in his name. Whatever that meant, I wasn't sure, but it did encourage me to keep asking. And I read where James, apparently the brother of Jesus, said, "If any of you lacks wisdom, then ask God for it, and he will give it." Well, I felt renewed hope that my request for wisdom not only would be granted, but also it was the right thing to be asking for, at least according to James. My father often told me I had no common sense. This bothered me a lot. In particular, he said that I didn't have the kind of respect for money that he thought I should have. But then I read that God's wisdom is considered to be foolishness by most people. Could my lack of what my father called common sense at least be partly caused by some uncommon wisdom? Finally, I discovered the rest of the teachings of Jesus, and with them, this comment from our Lord. The Queen of Sheba traveled all the way from her home country to listen to King Solomon's wisdom. And yet, there is someone here who is wiser than Solomon. He went on, the wildflowers don't work or make clothes for themselves, yet not even King Solomon, with all his wealth, had clothes as beautiful as one of these flowers. If God can clothe the grass of the field so beautifully, won't he clothe you too, if you have faith? So I studied the Sermon on the Mount, and I noted that it finished with a story, again, about wisdom. It was about a wise man and a foolish man. The wise man was the one who heard the teachings of Jesus and then obeyed them. Nothing could shake his house. The foolish man, on the other hand, he heard them, but he did not obey. So over the years, I've discovered that the world is full of people who tell stories about asking for wisdom and just never think to ask for it for themselves. They talk about life being more than material wealth, and then live like nothing matters except making money. They listen to the teachings of Jesus, but never even consider obeying them. Well, in fact, a lot don't even listen. What incredible foolishness, as Jesus pointed out himself. We have in the teachings of Jesus the formula for becoming even wiser than Solomon. Yet people let it slip away because they would rather waste their lives on trivia. What a tragedy. Wisdom has nothing to do with IQ or university degrees. It does not require superhuman discipline or self-control. People lack wisdom simply because they rarely ever think to ask for it. Their lives are wasted seeking everything else except the ability to make the right choices about what to seek in the first place. Then I discovered another significant verse of the Bible, and it also mentioned wisdom. It related to something called the mark of the beast. It's a mark that will be put in the right hand or in the forehead of people in the last days, without which they cannot buy or sell. The description finishes with these unusual words. Here is wisdom. Let him that has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Well, I got out this huge concordance to see if the number appeared anywhere else in the Bible. Sure enough, it did. It appeared in a chapter from the Old Testament, 1 Kings chapter 10. The very same chapter that Jesus was referring to when he said that the Queen of Sheba had traveled a long distance to hear Solomon's wisdom, but that he, Jesus, had greater wisdom than Solomon's. This chapter, with the number of 666 in it, says that the Queen of Sheba marveled at Solomon's wisdom. She marveled also at the temple that he had built. and she marveled at all the wealth that he possessed. It finishes by saying that the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. Interesting. I had started by being inspired by Solomon, but in my search for wisdom, it led me back to something better in the wisdom of Jesus. Jesus basically leaves Solomon for dead. Okay, Solomon had great wealth, but Jesus pointed to the birds and the flowers and told his disciples that what would make them special would be the poverty. Blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, he promised. Even the link between Solomon and a man-made temple gets considerable mention in Bible prophecy. I won't go into all of that here. Nevertheless, we do know that while the world waits for a visible temple to be built over there in Jerusalem, true followers of Christ know that an agreement to rebuild Solomon's temple is the signal for the countdown to the end. First, it'll lead to the mask being ripped off the beast, and then it will lead to the return of Christ. Now let's back up to the teachings of Jesus. Jesus never used the term mark of the beast, but he did label money or mammon as the devil's ultimate deception. He said we're each faced with a choice, to work for God or to work for mammon. Certainly the reference to gold in 1 Kings 10 was not just a coincidence, nor was it a coincidence that Jesus directed the world's attention to that chapter in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus dared to challenge the wisdom of Solomon with his own heavenly wisdom. Everywhere you look in the religious world today, you're going to find fake champions being raised up by the clergy and others in an effort to take on and defeat the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. They'll follow anybody else except Jesus. Jesus Christ himself is the answer. Some have tried to use Moses, arguing that the law written in stone is superior to the grace and truth that Jesus came to reveal. Many more have tried to use Paul, arguing that Paul is equal to or even greater than Jesus. And others, with their abominable prosperity gospel, have tried to use Solomon. But none of these characters, nor indeed anyone else in human history, can hold a candle to Jesus, the only begotten Son of God. Nevertheless, the Son of God that is not being listened to or obeyed today. Now that's the theme of this channel. We're calling for the world to return to the Prince of Peace and listen to him. But we don't have much time in which to preach this message because the mark of the beast and everything that follows it is getting closer every day. Our practical preparation takes the form of learning how to live more and more simply. You can see that in our chats and in the videos that we produce. Learning how to hear God's voice, guiding us from day to day. Learning how to give our lives each day in love for God and for others. I'm calling on each of you and everyone who listens to the Voice in the Desert channel to listen to Jesus. Drop your defenses and kneel broken before the Son of God. Hear him and him alone. Then obey him. If you do, you're going to discover the revolutionary wisdom of the kingdom of heaven and the true message of the revelation of Jesus Christ. Amen. All right, so that's all I have to say by way of introduction today. On the Voice in the Desert channel, there's a 40-minute documentary on the mark of the beast. There's a 7-hour illustrated novel as well on how I would imagine things to happen in the next few years based on my understanding of Bible prophecy. And there's a growing number of short videos by others like myself who have discovered the Jesus of the Bible and who are doing what we can to prepare for his return. So I hope you'll check all of those out. In the meantime, this is your chance to ask questions about this whole exciting subject of Bible prophecy and the return of Jesus. Remember, I won't have answers for some of what you see. I'm not an expert, but I do feel that God has let me see enough to know that we need to be taking Jesus a lot more seriously now than we ever have at any other time in human history. Listen to Jesus now before it's too late. Let's see, any questions coming in?
Yeah.
I'm looking in the wrong place, it seems. What's happened here? Okay, there it is. I don't know. I think it was under a search. Oh, this comes from John. In regards to seals and trumpets, do you think they've already begun to be opened and blown over the last 2,000 years since Christ's ascension? Also, what are your thoughts on the little scroll that John ate? Well, the second one's easier for me. I think the little scroll is the revelation itself. It's a little book that the passage says that it was sweet like honey in the mouth, but bitter when it reached the stomach. And that's the way the revelation is. I think a lot of people get intrigued by it. It's a lot of fun to think we can figure it all out and decode things and that sort of stuff. And so it seems sweet. And there's a little bit of superficial interest in the revelation. But as you get more into it, more hearing about what it's saying, the message is incredibly challenging. And it's not one that's going to appeal to the general public. It's really only there for those who want to serve God and who are prepared, basically, to die for him. That's what it comes down to. The seals and the trumpets. All right, well, the seals I see in general, which comes in the first few chapters of the book after those 3 chapters of letters to the churches. The seals are like just an introduction to the rest of the book. And so the thought about things being fulfilled over the last 2,000 years is a thought where people take isolated bits and pieces from the revelation. And you've probably heard people say, oh, everything's been fulfilled now. We've ticked off the list except for 1 or 2 things. And when that happens, well, then Jesus is going to return. No, it's not like that. It's not written that way. These are not isolated incidents. So if it says a mountain is going to crash into the sea, it's not talking about Krakatoa. It's talking about something that fits together in the context of Jesus returning. And it has a message. All of it has to have a message that's complete and unified. The trumpets represent a period of 3.5 years called the Great Tribulation. Now, some experts will say it's 7 years. We won't argue over that at this point. Whether it's 7 years or 3.5 years, the trumpets are talking about this period of great trouble. And it's sometimes easy to remember that by understanding that both start with TR, trumpets, tribulation. And the tribulation, when it starts, you can start counting the numbers until the days until Jesus returns. So that's fairly significant. Nobody really knows when it's going to start. We can't say now, but when it does, then you can be pretty sure. And I think it's because it's going to be a very difficult time. And at least we have a countdown. We have a light at the end of the tunnel that we can hang out for. Now, let's see what we have here. This one's from Joel. What are your thoughts on the current Jewish state of Israel, and what role do you believe they have in the days to come as a people and a nation? Probably if you have read my novel Survivors, or some of the other things that I've said, you would have part of an answer that you can pick up from the Voice in the Desert channel. In general, I see that what is happening over in Israel and what is going to happen over in Israel is the counterfeit. The churches today are probably no more Christian than the Pharisees were in the days of Christ. They've seen them, they've heard them, but they haven't accepted him. And so as a consequence, there are huge movements, very strong movements in the church to get back to the Old Testament, to get back to being Jewish, to lift up and praise the Jews. It goes as far as Donald Trump, and the guy's got really no faith at all. Anyone can see that. in anything except himself, but he still knows you got to praise the Jews because he gets a lot of votes from churches in America that are obsessed with the Jews and tell themselves that all you have to do is promote the Jews and you're promoting Christ and forgetting it. These are the guys that killed Christ, that let his blood be upon us and our children. So things are happening in Israel. Most significant will be when there's an agreement to rebuild the temple. That's the key thing for students of Bible prophecy to be watching for, because you can basically predict the end from that point. And that's like 7 years before Jesus returns. You can start the countdown. So that temple will be rebuilt, I believe, at the same time that God's real spiritual temple comes together. The Christians, since the time of the death of Christ, have been part of an invisible kingdom. We've made the mistake over and over again of assuming our religious denominations are that kingdom. But no, it's been invisible ever since Jesus said it's finished. The Old Testament Jewish state of Israel was finished. The new Israel that is predicted in Bible prophecy is not a Jewish state over in that country called Israel. It's a new Jerusalem that's coming down out of heaven. It's a new temple of the Holy Spirit in us. And I believe God is going to bring all Christians together in a visible unity in those last 7 years, at the same time that the counterfeit, the beast himself, makes an agreement to give the Jewish state of Israel their temple. And all of that's going to lead to the worst evil that the world has ever experienced. Jack says, do you believe we are the last generation? I think so, Jack, but nobody can prove that. It could be very, very long before Jesus returns. Certainly for centuries, people have had some expectation and he has not come. We have reached that point at which the vast majority of the masses have given up waiting. Now that's the sign you want to actually look for. So when people stop thinking he's going to come is when he'll come. That's what the Bible says, when we least expect him. One of the reasons I think we probably are the last generation has to do with the mark of the beast. This is coming in very quickly. And I don't know that Christians are going to be able to live much longer than 7 years without it. When you cannot buy or sell anything, it's going to be extremely difficult. And the sad thing is that very few Christians today are preparing for that. We're going to have to learn to live without what we would call money today. As we have money now, yeah, we can use it, but it's not going to be there. We're becoming more and more cashless. And eventually it will be a mark in your right hand or in your forehead, a mark which the Bible says will bring a curse on everyone who receives it. So if we're going to follow Christ, we're going to have to learn how to live without that mark. And I can't see us doing that for more than a generation. I can't even see us doing it for that long. Okay, this one, I have two questions here together. This one came from Peter. Bless you for your message. How do you feel about someone like me who has debts, credit cards, mortgages, etc., but is far from rich, trusting in Jesus all the time? How does that fit with the mark of the beast? Are you, Peter? That's the thing I want to get people to question. Okay, I'm not the one to judge. Ultimately, it's between you and God. And so many people write to me and say, "Is this a sin? Is this a sin? Can I do this and still go to heaven?" Look, I can give you whatever answer you want to hear, but it's really God who's going to make that final decision. And we need to learn how to listen to God and ask him. Just a kind of general, fairly human observation is how many people tell me they've got a mortgage on their house, but they're not rich. I'm sure these people have never traveled in the rest of the world. If you got a house, I don't care whether you've got a mortgage or not, you're rich. What would be average, I guess, for the rest of the world would be probably something about the size of your garage. And debit card debts need to be paid. Okay, you willingly made yourself a slave when you go into debt. That's what you are. You are a slave. You can say a person in any job who's just working for money is a slave, but at least that person has the freedom. If they want to, they can quit the job. You create a debt, and you owe your soul to the company store, as words of an old song by Tennessee Ernie Ford used to say. He said, "St. Peter, don't call me because I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store." It's a song called 16 Tons. So, these things are serious issues, which we can't just sort of say, oh, well, that's my situation, but I'm just trusting Jesus. How much are we trusting Jesus? Are we trusting Jesus enough to do what he said? Are we trusting him enough to forsake everything so that we can, maybe at least sell it and make a start towards paying off our debts? Or are we just kind of trusting Jesus if we live like all the other people in our country live, but we, I don't know what, put a fish on our car or something, and that's trusting Jesus. I'm not wanting to pass judgment on anyone on this channel. At the same time, I really do have to be faithful to what Jesus has taught and to try to encourage people to be moving more and more in that direction. Okay, Callan. From Callan, hello, voice. I was just thinking about the microchip mentioned and shown in the documentary, that it could be something else, and that the microchip could just be a beta test or version of it. I think this because the mark to me is something visible on the skin, and that there would not be a way to hide it, hence why it will be on the forehead or right hand. So my question is, do you think the mark could be in the form of a digital tattoo in the near future? I think primarily, Callan, the prophecy about the mark of the beast does not say a lot of things that people assume it's saying. And so we sometimes make it more complicated than it is. I personally believe that the technology will improve over the next few years for the microchip implant. They're talking about it now being the size of a grain of rice. I could very well imagine it being almost microscopic, something that would could be buried deep into the hand, so it could never be removed. That's the way I would picture it. I don't see anything, because it says there's a mark put in your hand and put in your forehead, that it has to be a visible mark. And I think making it invisible is more likely than a tattoo. And I'm not sure a tattoo quite works the same as an RFID in terms of buying and selling. It could identify somebody, but I'm not sure that it would. Though I noticed the comment says a digital tattoo. Let's just see. Let's just watch how technology progresses. But I certainly think what we have now is sufficiently close enough to the prophecy that we need to see it as being at least a forerunner of the eventual mark. Okay, Sheila asks, what are your views on storing up food and supplies? There may come a time at which Christians should be doing that, Sheila, but I think probably in comparing it with the teachings of Jesus, it's kind of a little bit more like the story of the farmer who tore down his barns and built bigger ones. That mentality, you see, is still a materialistic mentality. That what we need to do is to look after number one. Whereas I think if there's going to be any way to survive during the tribulation, it's going to have to be somewhat supernatural. And rather than storing up more food, what I think we need to do is to learn how to live on less food, and learning to live on less money in particular, which is what many of my friends are doing in places around the world. They're learning to live with the very minimum amount of cash, and discovering ways that they can survive. They can get their food, they can get their clothes, they can get their accommodation. I had a report last week from a group of 9 people living in the Los Angeles area that spends on average $3 a day. And that probably most of that is for fuel driving around. They have a vehicle. They're not actually living out in the streets. But $3 a day is a pretty good start. And it makes it a lot easier than having to store up food. When you start storing up food, you are restricted, because you have to stay where the food is. Okay, you can't move. And I think Jesus, when he talked about the birds, was suggesting that what we need to do is be more like the birds, that when it dries up in one place, they go to another. And we're open to move with God. Your secret stashes of food are not going to let you do that. So let's learn to listen to God and hear him telling us where to go and when. And I think he is telling a few people that they should at least be thinking in terms of leaving America. But that's got to be something between you and God. The main point is that this survivalist mentality overlooks a lot of the spiritual things that Jesus taught. All right, we have another question here. From John, there are some that believe the third temple is the body and not an actual temple. What are your thoughts? Well, I think what I mentioned earlier is it's not like it's 1, 2, 3, but there are parallels. Those who are looking at the physical temple in Jerusalem are on the wrong track. Those who recognize the Holy Spirit indwelling individuals are on the right track. And that's the temple that God is building. The temple is not visible, but I think at the same time that the counterfeit becomes visible, the spiritual is going to become visible as well, and that God will bring together those true believers who are following the Lamb wherever he goes. And not many are doing that at the moment. Faith Step has said, why is it that we cannot enter heaven with the devil's mark? How is it that something physical can affect the spirit? It's an interesting point, Faith Step, in that whenever I mention the verse from 1 Timothy 6, where Paul says the love of money is the root of all evil, people will very quickly respond, the love of money, not money. There's nothing wrong with money. And of course, my thought is, why are they being so defensive about the money? Yeah, it's a technicality. It's like saying, guns don't kill people. It's the people that pull the trigger. Or, there's nothing wrong with drugs, cocaine, ice, heroin, anything. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just getting addicted to them that's the problem. Well, it's such an obvious link between defending money and loving it that you wonder why they make that distinction. Nevertheless, technically, it's valid. Jesus used money. The early Christians used money. I use money. I won't work for it. I'm not serving money. But if someone gives me money, I accept it. This won't be the same thing when the mark of the beast comes in. And so at that point, it stops being, a net of difference between someone who's using money and someone who's abusing it. And it becomes a no for everyone. The spiritual implication of the mark of the beast is that God has been trying to tell us for 2,000 years, stop working for money. And nobody's listening. They just go on day after day working for money. And yet when the mark of the beast comes, that's when God says, I've had enough of that. Stop pretending that you don't love money when you're spending most of your life trying to get it. Okay, a lot of questions coming in, which is great. Barnesy says, I have been studying a few videos on this subject just before this meeting, as well as my studies on the subject in the past. Within the last 45 minutes, I came to a conclusion. I now believe both sides. Those who believe the mark of the beast is a 666 barcode implant on the right hand, and the Seventh-dayers who believe it's the Sunday worship when it becomes law through the ecumenical order of the one world order. Pause as the bell rang. I now have reason to believe it's both. Without placing all my notes here on the subject, which I'm willing to do if requested, I now believe this is possibly the case. Okay, Barnesy, whatever. I've said a fair bit about what I consider to be very, very damaging teaching from the Seventh-day Adventists. I mean, they're coming out now and saying you can take the mark of the beast in the form of the implant as long as you don't worship God on Sunday. God really, really hates anyone who worships him on Sunday. It has nothing to do with what the prophecy said. I still have not been able to figure out how anyone can think that what you read at the end of the 13th chapter of the Revelation has anything to do with some supposedly secret laws that are hanging around out there in conspiracy world that are going to say you got to go to church on Sunday. And why the devil would even do that? It's got nothing to do with buying and selling. It's got nothing to do with your hand or your forehead. So I just, for myself, I can't see how it's both. That's great that you see it as both. But do listen, the greatest proponents against the implant of the Seventh-day Adventists, they're telling everyone, take it, it won't hurt you, take it, most of the churches don't say anything yet. I mean, they'll say take it in the end too, but the Seventh-day Adventists are listened to, and they get some credibility because they've done a lot of research on the general subject of Bible prophecy, but this conclusion is just so far out in left field. I don't know how anyone could be believing it. Okay, one from Dino. Is it possible the mark of the beast is more than just something physical that can be placed inside one's physique? The Antichrist, more than a physical individual, something and someone that can actually take over your soul. Didn't Jesus say, what you eat cannot defile you? Fear not those who can destroy the body. I'm not sure how the Bible quote relates there, Dino, but yeah, it could be lots of different things, but why can't it be what it just says? That's what keeps coming to my mind. Why do people even now it's right there in front of you, that's what the banks are telling us they're going to do, They're going to give you a microchip implant that you can use in the same way you use a credit card now, but it'll be in your hand where it can never disappear. That's what they're saying, and you will use it for buying and selling. I don't understand why one of the most common reactions from people is, no, I think it's something else. Well, it may be something else in addition, but I know what it is, okay? And that's something you put in your hand that you use for buying and selling. Okay. Sheila, thank you for my answer to her question about storing up. She says, I was hoping that you would say that storing up can be stressful and people can steal anyway. Yeah, and it eventually leads, the guns, doesn't it? Because you don't want your neighbors to come and get your stash. I shared with someone recently the fact that for a while, my wife and I were saving up pills, because we won't be able to buy medicine, and our life will depend on it. And so we were putting aside a little bit, and then it just got to the point where it was too much bother. And so we just decided we'd go ahead and use them up and just live for the day and trust that when the time comes, we might die, but so what? We've had a good life. And God might also do something miraculous. Now, in terms of just practical preparation, yes, let's prepare in little ways that we can. But I don't think the practical preparation has to do with us storing up. I just think that's so contrary to everything Jesus taught. The whole concept of living by faith. Okay, we have a question here from Denise. Whoa, I was expecting this one to come up. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer it, but I'll try. There's that prophecy in Revelation 12 about the woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet. This is a rich image, and it gives opportunity for all kinds of conjecture and dispute. But I saw a very interesting article, one among several, that provides a compelling description of a stellar alignment to happen in September 2017. That is a literal picture of this image. I also listened to a scholar on the radio recently describing planned, scheduled religious ceremonies in Europe that involve a formal declaration by the present religious leadership of the global unity of the Abrahamic religions. Okay, I'm not sure if that's a separate issue, the second one. That's beyond my comprehension anyway, but I'll deal with the first a little bit. Denise says, what do you think of this? The stellar alignment thing was the one. As soon as I hear Revelation 12 or the woman mentioned these days, I just assume it's going to refer to September of this year and the stellar alignment. You don't have to spend too much time on the internet searching for videos about when the end of the world is going to come, when the Antichrist is going to be revealed, when Jesus is going to come back. when the tribulation will begin, when the rapture will happen. Virtually, I haven't seen a month go by myself that there hasn't been somebody predicting this is the month when it's going to happen. And stellar alignments, they do it all the time. Every time something lines up, it means something's going to happen, and every time nothing happens. Simple as that. So when I hear stellar alignments, I don't even listen. I don't see anything in the Bible that says anything about stellar alignments. If we could just get back to reading it the way it is. Okay, and that part of Revelation 12 is not that easy either, because we have this woman who at first glance appears to be Mary, the mother of Jesus, because this woman gives birth to a man-child who's going to rule the world with a rod of iron. However, it goes on from that to describe things that happened long after Mary and Jesus left this planet, and relating to when Jesus comes back. And it becomes clear that the woman is, well, you could say the church, the true Israel, that brought forth Christ, that he was born out of the Old Testament concept of the church, and he continues to lead the New Testament concept of the church. And so that woman, I believe, is the bride of Christ, as well as this allegory or illustration of it as the mother of Christ. And Jesus said to his disciples one time, when his physical mother and brothers were trying to get his attention, these people here who are listening to me, they are my mother and my brothers. And so the main thing is for us to listen to Jesus, to be part of that woman, and let September come and go, and I can guarantee you nothing's going to happen. Okay, this is from Michael. I'm Mike from Nigeria. I'm 17. I'm about to go to college. How do I forsake all and follow Jesus at my age and escape the matrix, fully knowing my parents will not allow me and they expect me to graduate and make money to take care of them? It's confusing. In most countries, Mike, until you're 18 years old, you're a minor, and you're basically like a prisoner. Your parents will tell you and have the right to tell you what to do, unless it's something immoral. And if your parents want you to go to college until you turn 18, then that's what you should definitely do. By the time you turn 18, unless there's something I don't know about rules in Nigeria, you become an adult and you have the right to make your own decisions. So to say my parents won't allow me overlooks the fact that we, after the age of 18, have freedom to make our own choices. Please do contact us and get in touch. We have quite a number of teenagers who are sharing with one another around the world and encouraging one another as they wait for the day when they turn 18 or whatever it is, that they're free to follow Christ and live by faith. No, let's see. Okay, here it is. From Kevin. Yesterday, I was reading through the book of Revelation, and I noticed that always when it was talking about the mark of the beast, it also talked about worship of the beast's image. I personally think they're connected in a way, which goes back to the Garden of Eden and the enmity of man and the serpent, which was the beast or the devil. As God made man in his image and gave him his spirit, the beast is said to have an image, which is made by man, and he gave it a spirit. There are way more connections to the book of Genesis, which I won't mention here because it would be too much. Do you think there's a connection between the two? Yeah, well, this is the case with so many teachings that, we could write whole books on them, various connections that we see and how we understand them. Certainly the image of the beast is one that I really, I just don't know. I wrote a novel and there's an image in there that is able to kill people that don't bow down to it. But, that was, just my very human attempt to try to imagine how this might be. The fact that the image can speak as well as being seen could this relate to television these last days, which has had a powerful influence on the masses and has primarily, according to sociologists, taken the role of the church in telling the masses of the world what's right and what's wrong. Most of us get our morality from TV more than we do from any church or religious connection. But yeah, as to what the image is, plenty of room for various opinions on that one. Okay, Peter's written in. He remembers 16 ton. He said, "You must be about my age." In Scripture, Jesus often sent disciples to a follower's home to seek food and shelter. Does this not indicate that Jesus did not look at owning property as a bad thing? I'm not sure that he did often send his disciples to a follower's home to seek food and shelter. What happened on a couple of occasions is he sent the disciples out to preach the gospel. And as they preached the gospel, he said in each town they would find people who would offer accommodation to them, or they should ask who's worthy to provide that accommodation. It didn't necessarily mean these people that they were staying with were disciples. But we do know that Jesus himself stayed at a house when he was in the area of Capernaum. He would often go to Peter's house. So then we know Peter had a house. The assumption that people make, and I say a lot about this, how we read something in the Bible and then we add a little something to it based on our own experience and culture. And so the assumption we think is that every time a house is mentioned in the Bible, someone has the title deed for that house. Realizing that, a large percentage of houses even today are not owned by the people who live in them. They're tenants. Okay, and so Peter may have been a tenant in that house in Capernaum. They still thought of it as his house. But we read very specifically in the book of Acts that after the day of Pentecost, when the thousands were swept into the church, one of the first things they did was, if they owned houses or land, what did they do with them? They sold them. That's what it says. All those who owned houses or land sold them. Now, later we hear they're in houses. Well, obviously, they rented some. I mean, that seems the most logical thing. At any rate, the houses ceased to be private homes for private individuals and became in themselves churches. And so Paul would send letters to so-and-so and the church which is in his house, because his house was being used as a church. Okay, Jack says, I know this is a bit off topic, but what do you think of the black Hebrew Israelites? Not an expert on that, Jack. I would say just superficially, from what I've seen of it, it's not very nice. Very arrogant, self-righteous, racist. Anything that I've seen in white people being racist toward black people seems to be also there in terms of black people being racist toward white people, which is primarily the emphasis of the black Hebrew Israelite thing. I would broaden my comments to include not just black Hebrew Israelites. All of this obsession with the Hebrew Israelites, the Hebrew roots, the new Israel, all these sort of things, taking people back to the Old Testament, have one thing in common, and they all steer you away from Jesus and his authority. And they replace Jesus' authority with the Old Testament and a visible kingdom that they become obsessed with. And that kingdom bears horrible fruit as far as the kingdom of heaven is concerned. Okay, comment here from Mike. Not trying to get too assuming on all this, but it's sure some coincidence. I don't know if you've heard of this, but the 666 Fifth Avenue address in New York City, owned by Jared Kushner, advisor to Donald Trump, has a tenant renting space known as Lucent Technologies. They manufacture telecommunications equipment, and they do research and development on new forms of said technology. Their Wikipedia page outright declares their name's relationship to Lucifer as well. That's interesting. Somewhere I read they have a connection to the manufacture or research into RFID chips, although I'm not sure if that is speculation from internet forum users. Who actually brought my attention to these coincidences, or whether that is official. Hope you keep it in mind, however. There was a whole book actually written a number of years ago on that number 666, and people from all over the world sent in their little discoveries of political figures whose car number plate had 666 in it, addresses with 666 in it, and from all these things you could sort of trace things, but it's bordering on superstition as far as I'm concerned. That the number has to do with buying and selling the mark of the beast, and the guy who brings in this mark, and his name. Okay, so that's one important thing, is that you identify the Antichrist through adding up the numerical value of the letters in the Antichrist's name. In Hebrew, that's called gematrix. It's a whole kind of a science or something in itself. So that's, to me, the primary reference to the 666, although it also appears in that other place in the Bible with Solomon. Okay, we're getting towards the end of the questions, and I've got what's supposed to be a question here, but it seems to be blank. That was from Mike from Nigeria, the 17-year-old. I seem to have received 2 more from you, Michael, but I can't find a question on them. Oh, maybe you just resent the other one. Okay, now there's another one that has come in anyway. From Samuel Barnsey. To answer briefly, he says the current Pope is a Jesuit, and the first Jesuit Pope. The Pope is the Antichrist. It is hidden in plain sight on his silly hat. Revelation 14:9-11, those who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. King James Version. There's a lot of things coming out of this present Pope that don't sound very good, and he may be right up there. I would say false prophet rather than Antichrist, if he's the one. But I don't think it's right up there on his silly hat. Okay, this is kind of a myth, I think, that has been taught by many people since the time of Martin Luther, actually, but certainly Seventh-day Adventists and others, that the title of the Pope, the Vicar of Christ, adds up to 666. Well, it doesn't. Okay. Samuel's subject line says vicarious filii Dei. Okay, that's the name that adds up to 666. It's not on the silly hat. It's not on the chair he sits in. It's in a couple of documents that were written centuries ago by a couple of popes where they used that title, the Vicar of the Son of God. The Latin numerals in that title, vicarious filii Dei, add up to 666. But the official title, possibly on his hat, on his throne, wherever it is, the official title for the Pope is Vicar of Christ, which does not add up to 666. So, it's a interesting sort of theory, but it does miss the mark a little bit because it's not the title. Okay, a few more letters coming in now. Frank says, I just wanted to make a comment in regards to the stellar alignment they referred to. I've researched this quite a bit after hearing people talk about the Revelation 12 sign on September 23rd, 2017. There's a program out there that maps the stars and their movement, and the Revelation 12 sign is supposedly going to happen on September 23rd. From what I gather, this sign in the heavens has only happened 2 other times in history that we know of. Well, that is according to this software program. That was 2,000 years ago when Jesus Christ was born, and 2000 AD in the days of Abraham. It's a very good documentary to watch. It's called The Star of Bethlehem. I believe everyone listening will find this amazing. People are quite welcome to go and check that out. The question we just need to keep asking ourselves, in relationship to Bible prophecy in general and the teachings of Jesus in particular, is what difference does it make? Okay, so many of these theories that get taught out there on the internet cannot be traced, and I think Frank has been fairly good about pointing that out. Things can be said, incredible things can be said on the internet, and people will believe them. Why? Because I saw it on the internet. I did research. Okay, that's a term these days. It's getting really cheap, and research means, I have nothing better to do all day than sit around and watch videos about conspiracy theories. And the more videos I watch, the more people are going to think I'm an expert. Now, if we have not learned how to question the source and keep saying, where is the source? Where is reliable evidence? then we're going to believe anything because, I can go there and you give me any lie you want to get the world to believe. You go there, say it often enough, and claim, that all the evidence has been hidden by people that don't want you to find the evidence. You'll get people to believe it, but it doesn't mean that this is a reliable source. Okay, from Julian. As someone who still wonders about many of the details of prophecy in the book of Revelation, I can't help but notice how clear and shocking the connection is between what Jesus taught in the Gospels about either serving God or serving money, and that same exact choice being presented as a final option in the Revelation. What you said earlier about needing to learn how to live without money strikes me as absolutely essential, especially for those who claim to be following Christ, in light of the references from the Gospels and the Revelation. Very good, Julian. And I wonder, when we call ourselves Christians and we say we know this is coming, why we don't do the obvious and start simplifying our lifestyle now, learning more about living outside the system. Julian goes on, another interesting connection is how Satan always wants to create a counterfeit to what God's doing. This seems to be the case with regard to God's original plan for a world based entirely on love, where money was absolutely irrelevant, like the Garden of Eden. What we're seeing unfold now is a demonically clever counterfeit of a world without money. Okay, we don't have to change hands with money now, at least in the form of a mark where no actual currency changes hands. But that which is based entirely on the root of all evil, which is still greed for the love of money. Okay, so the cashless society that we see today, what Julian is saying, is a demonic counterfeit of the Garden of Eden. Okay, people don't have to carry wallets anymore, so they can probably go around naked. And that's one of the things I said, you don't need to carry a wallet when you're at the beach, in a skimpy bikini or something, because you can do any buying and selling you like at kiosks down there on the beach, just through this mark in your hand. Diabolical counterfeits, very good. Okay, Cowan back. Cowan, I was talking to some people the other day, and while they would talk about flat Earth and the Mandela effect and other conspiracy stuff along those lines, I listened quietly. But eventually I just said, don't any of you see these things as distractions from getting prepared spiritually and physically from the teachings of Jesus? And they went quiet. It's a very good observation, Cowan. So my question is, would these be the tactics of the devil to deceive many in order for many to not be prepared? I would think so. We can be distracted by anything, get distracted by an ice cream cone. And obviously the devil wants us to get distracted. I don't want to be guilty of saying there's evil in all of these things. If someone believes the earth is flat and it doesn't stop them from following Christ, well, then I'm not going to get into an argument over flat earth. But the problem is, as you said, mostly these things become distractions. And people just get tripped off on that. And you try to tell them, about the really important issues that Jesus talked about, and they just haven't got time for it. They want to go out and save the world from the Mandela effect or whatever. Okay, here's one from Jonathan. Dear boys, great so far. I'm far from a scholar in the subject of prophecy, but I appreciate and I am considering your views. Has anyone done a numerical mathematical equation on the name of King Solomon? Perhaps a reference to the Antichrist is linked to Solomon. I'm just wondering. There's an interesting verse in, I think it's in one of Paul's letters to the Thessalonians, which says there are many Antichrists. Even in those days, there were Antichrists. Many people who are opposed to Christ and are sort of types of the ultimate Antichrist. But I don't think the ultimate Antichrist has arrived yet. And obviously, Solomon is history now. But he was a type of the Antichrist in the sense that, well, anybody can be. He became the distraction from Jesus. He is the number one distraction, possibly with Paul being a serious contender within church circles these days, because the prosperity gospel is built so heavily on Solomon's wealth and comments Solomon makes about wealth. So, people get distracted by that. The I think there's something about the star that witches and everybody used being coming from Solomon. But, I mean, there's all these different theories. The distraction of the temple, so many things that get us away from Jesus. But actually, checking out the numerical value of his name, just about every name you can think of it has been checked out. There's websites that sort of list the findings of various people. I found quite interesting ones of names that add up to 666. One of the problems when somebody tells you that a person's name adds up to 666 is that these people use every language in the world. They've got like 100 different systems they can use, and then they do adjustments to the names of everybody. So they might use a middle initial or no middle name at all, or a title, and they just try and try and try. What they're doing is contriving something, trying to make it fit. And there was one person that sort of challenged people and said, "Give me a name, I can make it add up to 666. Any name you give me, I can make it add up to 666 in one way or another." So I think we'd best not rush into a conclusion about who exactly is the Antichrist. When you see him making a contract or making an agreement to have the temple built in Jerusalem, you can be pretty certain then. But I also think that it will become clear without a lot of twisting that the name adds up to 666 in Hebrew, if not in Latin. Another question here from John: what are your thoughts on the destruction of Babylon? That is the United States. This was talked about in Survivors on this channel. Actually, John, I have a lot of material here that I could present at this time. There's a few other questions hanging, but I may just go ahead and give a longish answer to this one about the fall of America, because it is one that comes up fairly often. So I expected sooner or later someone was going to ask that question today. I have a few graphics that we can put on the screen, hopefully. And if you got a pen and paper, you might want to take a few notes on this. It's kind of a brief summary of some of the things that have led me and others to conclude that America will be destroyed before the tribulation. More than anything else, the reason people think that America is going to be destroyed, it's the absence of reference to America in the setup of the final world government, which seems to imply that America has been destroyed by then. In Revelation 18, verse 2, there we go, we have that on the screen. I lost my place here. The fall of Babylon is described in detail, although it's a cyclical thing. The original, and I'm going to show that through other points that I'll be making here as I go along, this cyclical thing. The original Babylonian Empire was destroyed by the Persian Empire, but spiritually, it was still the same entity. It just had a different leader. It's been like that throughout history. Babylon continues, and so when one world economic power collapses, another one takes its place and becomes the new Babylon. Today, the United States dominates world trade, even though it's not nearly as dominant as some of the previous world empires have been. Coincidentally, the only city of any size in the world today, called Babylon, is located in a borough on Long Island in New York City, a couple of miles from the New York Stock Exchange. I believe that one day soon, this American Babylon is going to fall, and it will be replaced by another more evil Babylon, which is the one that God will finally destroy. Okay, when Jesus returns, I don't think he'll be destroying America. I think someone else is going to destroy America, and then Jesus will destroy that someone else. Now, we get this image of Nebuchadnezzar that is found in the book of Daniel. The king of Babylon had a dream, and Daniel interpreted it for him. The dream was about this statue that you see on the screen now. Daniel showed Nebuchadnezzar that he, Nebuchadnezzar, would be succeeded by other empires. But they would all still be basically the same thing as his empire. It would still be the Babylonian Empire, but with a new leader. Another little interesting coincidence is that the Babylonian Empire is credited by many with having invented coinage. And this is represented on the image by the head of gold for Nebuchadnezzar. But each succeeding empire is represented by metals of less and less actual value as you work your way down the statue and what you see on the screen, until you get down to the final world power, which is made up of 10 toes. And it says these feet and toes are a mixture of iron and clay. Now, what's the primary ingredient in clay? Silicon. It's also the primary ingredient in silicon chips or microchips. If we can have a picture now of the 7 heads. If we have that there, that's it. This picture on the screen now is one that illustrates this point I'm trying to make about you just keep changing heads. Now, ironically, or maybe not ironically, maybe disappointingly, so many people who've tried to study the Revelation draw this creature with 7 heads, seven necks coming out of the same creature, which seems to totally miss the point. Okay, the point is that all of these heads are on there one at a time, each one replaced by another. Okay, so we have 7 world empires. The final world government appears to include an alliance between 10 different kings. And we just heard mentioned in Daniel's image, there are 10 toes. In this image, you'll see the final head has 10 horns, 10 different kings. Okay, now this is all going to come back to America eventually, believe it. Okay, why America is going to be destroyed. 7 of these heads are illustrated in the picture that you see now, but they're 10 horns. Revelation 17, verse 16. Tells us about these 10 horns, and it tells us something kind of interesting about them. They hate the prostitute, even though the prostitute and the images of Babylon. The prostitute is called Babylon. The image is called Babylon. Even though they're almost interchangeable, there is this hatred for one Babylon. Now, the ultimate fall of Babylon comes at the hands of God. But in Revelation 17, we read that there are 10 kings through whom the Antichrist rules the world, and they all hate some lesser form of Babylon that exists just before the final manifestation of the beast. I believe this is America. Together, and with guidance from the Antichrist himself, they succeed in destroying this lesser manifestation of Babylon. I believe these 10 kings are the 10 rotating members of the UN Security Council. And I believe they will rejoice when the Antichrist succeeds in destroying America. The United Nations Security Council, which is basically the strong arm of the United Nations, has 5 permanent members. 3 of those members are pro-democracy. 2 of them are communists. The 2 communists are Russia and China. Versus the 3 others, which are America, the United Kingdom, and France. By destroying America, the Antichrist will effectively subdue the other 2 kingdoms, France and England. And that leaves then Russia and China in control. Now, I'm going to show you something about these 5 permanent members of the United Kingdom and a reference to the 10 rotating ones. It seems more than just an amazing coincidence that these animals that are used for symbols for the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council are a dragon, a bear, a lion, an eagle, and a rooster or fowl. These are the very same animals that are used to describe world empires throughout history in Daniel's prophecy. But then when you go to the Revelation, these same animals are described with one difference. Okay, you see the lion with the eagle wings, okay? That's England and America. The 2 are linked, aren't they? But we read that the wings of the eagle are plucked, and then the lion ceases to be a beast anymore and becomes just another man. If America were destroyed, England would have very little power. It would its significance in world history at the moment is only because of America's role. Destroy America, and England's just another little country over there in Europe. So these same animals used by John the Revelator have left out the eagle wings. Okay, that's one indication that America will not be there in the end. Now, there's a mention of a dragon in John's description at the end, which you don't see on the screen at the moment. The Bible clearly says the dragon is the devil, but we know it's also a symbol for China. And one theory on that is that the Antichrist will be Chinese, whether he's from China or not, that he'll be Chinese. There's also a panther or a leopard mentioned in both passages. You see down there on the bottom. Now, I'm taking this to represent the rest of the world. Now, this is a place where I'm really speculating, okay? With a bit of confidence based on how all the other pieces fit together. You have this panther. Well, a leopard is just a spotted panther, or a panther is just a black leopard. They're the same animal. You know, they could mate with one another. It's just the coloring that's different. So I'm suggesting that the Black Panther is used at the moment for the black peoples and nations of the world, many of them being in the third world. But I apply it with regard to the rotating members of the United Nations to everybody apart from those first five. Okay, that all of the rotating nations, whether black or white, are part of this spotted panther. There's no symbol like that in the world at the moment today, and so that has to be taken with a grain of salt. So that gives you a rough idea why I would say that America will be destroyed, because I see all of these other countries represented except the eagle in the end. And we're told that the eagle's wings will be plucked. Now let's get back to some of the other questions. I hope people can make some sense of that one. All right, quite a few here coming in. Peter said, thank you for the answer about owning a home. It would seem from your answer that someone has to own a home so someone can rent it. I've always thanked Jesus for what he has blessed my family with, despite a mortgage. Okay. And somebody has to do the prostitution, or we could not have prostitution. I don't follow the reasoning. You know, if I've understood what you're saying, is that, well, somebody has to do it. The fact is that no, nobody has to do it. The home will still be there, whether anyone owns it or not. Okay, all the resources in the world are there. All the resources in the world belong to God. It is our desire as human beings, a greedy desire as human beings, to have it under our control that makes us want to buy it. And then if we can buy it, we have power. You know, we can now rent it out. And I think Jesus was trying to deal with that, you know, in his teachings, that he was trying to get people to see, look, the birds don't have all this stuff. Why do you need it? Peter goes on, though. It seems to me that the world is obsessed about the end time scenario. Do you think this is not healthy and really is something we must simply trust God about? To me, it seems it has almost become kind of a game for some. Yes, Peter, I would say all religion has become a game for some. So what do? Do we throw the baby out with the bathwater? It depresses me what I see coming from so many people who talk about Bible prophecy. But we don't throw Bible prophecy out. It's there for a reason. And it's not that confusing, you know, when you accept Jesus. And that's what bothers me. It's Jesus really that's been thrown out. The whole world thinks he's irrelevant. And that's what Jesus predicted. He said the cornerstone, which was him and his teachings, would be pushed aside by the builders. And so we tell ourselves in one way or another, you know, don't worry about it. Just get yourself a house, get yourself a family, a nice car. You know, don't overdo it, just a little bit more. That's all it takes. And you'll be happy. But it isn't really what Jesus taught. And it's not really what Christianity is about. Okay, Spyrus from Greece is writing, I wonder your thoughts about the 23:9 sign in the sky and the Revelation 12. Do you believe that this sign in the stars might as well be the coming of Jesus or the beginning of the coming? You may have missed what I just said earlier, Spyrus. No, I think it's a total distraction. I think it has nothing to do with Bible prophecy. There's nothing in the Bible that says we should be studying the stars and their alignments. It has been done scores of times over the last 100 years. People find various alignments that happen nearly, well, every year at least, but maybe every month. And I want to tell you something is going to happen when it doesn't. Just follow the teachings of Jesus. Okay, Edward says, I was just wondering about all the understandings of the New World Order and the Masons and the Illuminati, and do you believe they're malevolent and nefarious with intent? Though there are both black and white hats within the organizations, etc., white hats being good and benevolent intent. From what I've read and understand from all sources from everywhere, and as you understand too, Wikipedia is not a source of be-all and end-all to knowledge. My question is, I have understood the whole aliens agenda is basically demons and negative entities trying to influence man against Jesus through this distraction of aliens and a lot of conspiracy agenda. And in and of itself, it's negative agendas of disinformation too. Okay. A little hard to follow the whole sentence, but I think probably we're coming from the same place, Edward. Yeah, that all of this stuff, you have to really look at the fruit of it, you know. Yes, there's evil out there. Yes, there is a devil, and he's trying to tempt us, whether you picture little devils whispering in your ears or you picture, you know, Illuminati secrets happening around the world. There is a devil, but I think it not only becomes a distraction away from Jesus, but I think it also becomes a distraction away from the sin in our own lives, that we want to put the devil out there in a secret meeting amongst world leaders. And all we have to do is just, you know, make sure we don't hold our fingers in a certain way or put our hand in our coat at any time, or, you know, use red and blue in a photo of ourselves. All these different things that might be used by someone to say, he's a member of the Masons as well. He's a certain level member. It just becomes too incredibly convoluted, and there's only very limited people that have access to this secret knowledge, and it's all secret. You know, all these conspiracy things are secret. You have to have faith in them, and you have to really ask yourself, what is it doing as far as your own relationship with God is concerned? Where are you moving spiritually? Okay, we have an anonymous question. Some religions believe that Sunday worship is the mark of the beast. Is this true, and what are your thoughts on this? I have said a lot in the past about this. I have to be patient, though, because I understand in every one of these chats, there are new people that come along and they haven't heard the thoughts. Definitely do not believe Sunday worship is the mark of the beast. No way, there's not. And I challenge people, tell me, how does this fit with what the Bible says about buying and selling? Oh, well, there's going to be some kind of a Sunday law. I mean, the law still says you just have to go to church on Sunday. I don't know whether you have to stop and pick up the groceries on the way or what it's all about. But, you know, you just look at what it's teaching. Is the devil really going to tell people to worship God? You know, is that the kind of thing the devil would do? And is God going to punish someone forever in hell for worshiping him on the wrong day? One of the problems here, you see, is that people don't understand the word Sabbath means rest. It doesn't mean worship. Okay, Sabbath means rest. You know, all God's saying is, ease off, guys. Have a rest. You know, 6 days is plenty in which to work. Have a break. As to whether that is on Sunday or Saturday, probably has a lot to do with calendars over the last 6,000 years. I don't believe anyone knows whether we're actually, what we call Saturday today was the seventh day of creation. And when you live in a country like Australia, as I do, where the day is different because we're on the other side of the date line. You know, this is Sunday in Australia, but it's probably still Saturday in America. You begin to realize that, you know, there's no absolute thing as far as which day. But now here's the big point. This is the big but as far as A Voice in the Desert is concerned. And it's the point that these proponents about Saturday versus Sunday keep missing. Well, they're not prepared for it because nobody else gives this argument. Nobody else says, I've stopped working for money. You know, and so every day is the same. Every day is holy. That's what Jesus taught. And that's why Jesus replaced the fourth commandment. He improved on it. He had nothing against resting on Saturday, but he had nothing against resting on Sunday as well. And when you're not working for money, you take that heavy fear off of people that if you don't have money, you're going to starve to death. When you're actually working for God, you can say like Jesus, well, my dad works every day, and I do too. We're just enjoying it so much. What we're doing on Friday, we still want to do on Saturday, and we'll do it on Sunday as well. The whole thing over which day disappears when you start actually obeying Jesus, when you stop working for money. And then you find every day is holy. Okay, this one comes from Caleb. Speaking of Solomon being a type of Antichrist, here's a very telling verse that shows the heart of Solomon's supposed wisdom. This is from Ecclesiastes chapter 10. A feast is made for laughter, and wine makes merry. But money answers everything. That's Solomon's wisdom, folks. Okay? Is that Jesus' wisdom? Okay, that's a very good illustration, Caleb, of how lost you're going to be if you follow Solomon. And it's probably one of the issues that has come up in so many of our chats on this channel is people want to take us away from the teachings of Jesus. And we need to be careful, even with the subject of Bible prophecy, that we don't let it get us away from the teachings of Jesus and on all these other things that are always based on somebody besides Jesus. What somebody else said, like Solomon. And what Solomon's in the Bible, it's the Word of God. No, Jesus is the Word of God. Okay, James. It may be foolishness, but in Latin numbers, but admittedly, this is a simplistic look at Roman numerals that denote 666. It could be DCLXVI. I'm sorry, I don't follow that, James. He said, I doubt I'd be taken seriously either on this channel or on YouTube with that interpretation. I'm not. Okay, DCLX is elects. These are the letters that add up to 666 in Latin, which is DCLXVI. Okay, and he's saying something about okay, but maybe Washington D.C. Okay, I'm figuring out here that Washington D.C. elects VI. I'm not sure how we get the I from VI. And it may relate to the I on the American dollar note. Am I guessing in here on the top of the pyramid? Yeah, I would say it's a little bit stretching the point, James. But thank you for sharing that. Okay, we have another question from Cowan. I was just wondering about John the Baptist being recognized as Elijah by Jesus, and I was wondering about if there will be an Elijah before the second coming, or will he come before the two witnesses? What are your thoughts? I think that Elijah will be one of the two witnesses. It is a little bit of a mystery because Jesus said John the Baptist was Elijah. If this was Elijah who had been kind of just sitting up in heaven waiting all this time to come down, you think John the Baptist would have been more aware of that. John didn't think he was. People asked if he was that prophet, and he said no. But Jesus says, yeah, he is. So, it may be the spirit of Elijah that was there. On the Mount of Transfiguration, the disciples saw the real Elijah. And then again in the prophecies about the two witnesses, you find Old Testament references that seem to suggest that they are Elijah and Moses. But again, it may be the spirit of Elijah and the spirit of Moses. Interesting thing about the closing verses of the Old Testament talk about God sending a messenger in the last days who will return the hearts of the fathers to their children. And I think that's relevant to the fact that Jesus taught the fathers stop working for money. And, fathers would stop working for money. They might have more time for the children, and the whole society may benefit from that. But nobody seems to be listening. This is from Frank. He said, a lot of people jump on the bandwagon when they read something or view something online. Question everything. Very good point. Just because someone says something doesn't make it true. I myself have prayed daily for wisdom. Upon praying for wisdom, I've always asked for truth and knowledge. You would be amazed some of the things the Lord has shown me. However, most men would think I'm crazy. The reason the Lord has revealed most of these things to me was to help bring people to the kingdom by revealing the truth. There are many things in our world today that were put in place by Satan to deceive men let's retype here, maybe to debunk the Bible, making it as if God doesn't exist. I give all the glory to God and our Savior Jesus Christ for the knowledge they have shared with me. It's been a long and hard road convincing others, but with the Lord's strength, I move on. That was from Frank. Okay, now this is from someone called Yeshua ben, okay, Jesus, Son of God, I think, and they spell God's name properly with no vowels, so I can't say it. Okay, buy and sell. Okay, it just says a question mark at the start of this. Proverbs 23:23. Buy the truth and sell it not. Also, wisdom and instruction and understanding. This person says, you do well with most of the things you've expressed. Your introduction was really calm, really spiritual, and really edifying. The money thing, I get it. I totally get what you assert. You have a good heart. I feel your spirit. You're not a harlot preacher. You do retain, however, a bit of carbon in your speech. Okay, what's the carbon? I'm not sure. You're a wise man because you've allowed your soul to think, not your carbon-based logical brain. Okay. I want to encourage you to continue, but please focus on the spirit. Any death, dying, decaying, organic body stuff is all distractions. The battle was for the soul, the true Christ seed. You keep coming back to the biblical Jesus. I love it when you speak of my Lord in this way. But I have to tell you and remind you, just because we don't read about the fake Jesus does not mean he was not de facto present during 0 to 33 AD. Trying to process what that means. I guess he's sort of saying that there was a fake Jesus even back then. John 4:23-24 says, the hour comes and now is when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeks such to worship him. God is the spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. He finishes by saying the spurious lamb, doppelganger, fake, in parentheses, he looks exactly like the true God, just like antimatter, similar but not the same. Spurious tree, wheat, and tare. My real name is Yeshua. I love you and thank you. Okay, well, Yeshua, I'm not sure if you're saying you're the true Jesus or the fake one. I'm not sure, but I'll stick with the one in the Bible. You say you're happy with that. I'm happy with that too. Let's stay with the Jesus of the Bible. All right, have we reached the end of the questions? It's looking close to that. Wait a minute. No, that's one I just read. Okay, so that's probably a good time to cut it off there. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And we'll be having another chat next weekend, same time, same station. We just haven't yet worked out what the topic will be, but I hope you'll come. And thank you again for all those terrific questions and comments. It was very interesting for me. Hope it was for others as well. God bless you, and goodbye.